The Supreme Federal Court in Brazil will start the trial on the so-called temporary framework, which will define the life of indigenous peoples and the future of the demarcation of their lands. President Maduro deployed the Bolivarian National Armed Forces and Civil Protection to assist the communities affected by heavy rains in the west of Venezuela. At least 8 convoys transporting logistical equipment to U.S. troops were attacked in different areas of Iraq. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, this is from the South. I am Ray Gomez. Welcome to the news. The Brazilian Supreme Federal Court will start on Wednesday the trial on the so-called temporary framework, which will define the life of the indigenous peoples and the future of the demarcation of their lands in the country. In the session, considered the most important of the century for the native communities, the court will analyze a land recovery lawsuit filed by the government of the southern state of Santa Catarina against the Xoglein people. The petition refers to the Iberama-Leclano Aboriginal lands where the Guarani and the Kangan peoples live. According to the time frame thesis used by the state, possession of the land is only guaranteed for those who can prove that they were in the area on the date of promulgation of the Federal Constitution, October 5, 1988. The court's discussion will be accompanied by a mobilization of more than 6,000 natives who since August 22nd and until August 28th are camping in downtown Brasilia. Prime Minister of Haiti, Ariel Henry, visited the Naples department, one of the hard-hit areas by the earthquake of August 14, and promised to respond to the urgent needs of the damaged communities. Prime Minister Henry was accompanied by the Minister of Tourism, Cassandra Francois, as well as other government officials. He also visited the municipalities of Anzavo and La Silla to assess the damages and provide assistance. La Silla, or at La Silla, the mandatory checked affected areas like the hospital and St. Joseph's Church, where he reaffirmed that his administration will work to repeat history on the management and coordination of aid, referring to the chaos that followed the country's devastating 2010 earthquake. In this context, several football fields became little shelters for many survivors after the earthquake. In the city of Lecaia, one of the areas worst affected by the quake, many survivors are sleeping in makeshift tents on the city's football field. Haitian officials estimated that there are 600,000 people in need of emergency assistance. The delivery of aid has been further hampered by heavy rains brought last week by Tropical Storm Grace.
We have been here on this football field for 10 days now. We were here with our children during the recent rains, storms and strong winds. We survived. We survived thanks to God. The tremors have not stopped. I have 3 children. We have been sitting here under sheets since Saturday. We can't go home because our house is destroyed. We have nowhere to live. The authorities did not come here to know what we need. When it rains, we don't know what to do. 2 days ago, it was raining around 4 o'clock. I had to sit with the baby.
About 200,000 hectares have burned in Bolivia in the latest wildfires, banned by hot and dry weather conditions. Early this week, there were 20 active fires in 9 municipalities and 7 protected areas, as reported by the government of Santa Cruz. Most of the blazes are concentrated in the forests of Chiquitania, a transition region between the Amazon to the north, the Chaco Plains to the south, and the Pantanal, the world's largest wetland, to the southwest. The catastrophe revives the image of the devastating fires of the last 2 years. In Japan, the decision of unloading contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant out to the Pacific Ocean is a stirring concern from citizens and neighbor countries. Daiichi, the Japanese operator from the Fukushima nuclear power plant, has decided to release the radioactive waters that were treated in the damaged grounds. The Tokyo Electric Power Company intends to unload the residual waters through a 1 kilometer long pipe, which will be contained in the tunnel that is to be drilled once submerged in the sea. The Japanese government decided in April to begin the unloading process in the Pacific Ocean during the spring of 2023. The idea has been strongly opposed by fishermen, local citizens, and neighbor countries such as China and South Korea. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back. And the Venezuelan authorities have reported at least 15 people dead due to the heavy rains that fell in the west of the country. President Nicolas Maduro said that more than 35,000 people were directly affected by the rains in 11 states, and more than 8,000 homes were destroyed. The torrential rains caused floods, landslides, and cuts in electricity and communications. On his part, the Interior Minister Remigio Ceballos reported that the thunderstorm season has arrived in Venezuela this year a little premature, and that rain is expected to continue. In the worst affected state of Merida, the Mocotes River overflowed and entered the main streets of Tovar.
In the face of the latest rains and the events in Merida and Tovar that we are going to show, we were affected. In the Special Civil Protection Report of the 23 states plus the capital Caracas, we had 85 municipalities affected. In Aragua, 6 municipalities. In Barinas, 6 municipalities. In Bolivar State, 7 municipalities. In Merida, 6 municipalities were highly affected. In Miranda, 7. Portuguesa, 7, among others. 85 municipalities were affected.
In other news, the United States Supreme Court said the Biden administration must comply with a lower court's ruling to reinstate President Donald Trump's policy that required many asylum seekers to wait outside the country for their cases to be decided. The administration had asked the court to put on hold and federal judges ordered that remain in Mexico policy, known as migrant protection protocols, had to be immediately re-implemented. U.S. District Judge Matthew Kaczmarek ruled earlier this month that the Biden administration did not provide an adequate reason for getting rid of the policy and that its procedures regarding asylum seekers who entered the country were unlawful. Immigration rights groups denounced the Supreme Court order and urged the administration to continue its efforts to rescind the program rather than implement it. In Mexico, a report reveals that at least 6,300 asylum seekers expelled by the United States suffered violence. A study released Tuesday by the pro-migrant organization Human Rights First notes that 6,353 reports of kidnappings and other attacks against migrants removed by the Democratic administration included allegations of rape, human trafficking, and violent armed assaults have been registered against asylum seekers, including children who were deported to Mexico. The deportations have provoked the concern of the United Nations agencies, which warned the U.S. authorities about the treatment of vulnerable migrants in need of humanitarian protection. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with his Austrian counterpart Alexander Schallenberg in Vienna. As part of a brief tour of Europe, the Russian diplomat also met with Federal Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. In addition to the bilateral issue, the situation in Afghanistan and Belarus, the COVID pandemic, and relations between the European Union and Russia were discussed. At the beginning of the visit, the Austrian Federal Chancellor said that despite open differences, it is important to maintain a dialogue with Russia. Lavrov also visited Vienna, headquarters of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and participated in a meeting with representatives of civil society social dialogue. China conducts naval drills on the occasion of U.S. and allied military maneuvers in the Western Pacific. Chinese armed forces began on Tuesday simultaneous training with live ammunition in the southern Chinese Sea, as well as in the Yellow Sea and in the Bohai Strait. The drills will be extended until Thursday on the eve of joint United States and other Quad countries' military operations in the Western Pacific. The Pentagon attempts by coordinated military procedures with Australia, India, and Japan to ensure the members of the quadrilateral security dialogue that Washington is committed to the region in a move seeking to dissipate concerns amid the consequences of the troops' withdrawal in Afghanistan and the chaotic situation in Kabul. China urged the United States not to politicize the COVID-19 origin. Research Director General of the Arms Control Department of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Fu Kong, attended this issue by making a public statement in which he also invited the World Health Organization to investigate Fort Detrick and the University of North Carolina on the grounds of reciprocity.
We once again urge the United States not to politicize the whole issue. I would say scapegoating China cannot whitewash the U.S. If the United States persists in hyping up the lab leak theory, then they should set an example and invite the WHO to investigate the Fort Detrick and the University of North Carolina. The international community has long had concerns regarding Fort Detrick. As a matter of fact, the U.S. has conducted more biomilitary activities than any other country in the world. The international community has grave concerns on all the biomilitary activities of the U.S., including Fort Detrick, at home and in the over 200 biomedical labs around the world.
Until Sunday, 3,120,000 people in Cuba had received 3 jabs of the Zubaran and Abdallah vaccines. On Tuesday, the immunization process for children in trial stages arrived to its 3rd and final shot. The clinical pediatric trial is another of many procedures implemented by the government to face the pandemic's critical situation. On this occasion, the tests are being conducted in the Children's Hospital Juan Manuel Marquez in Havana, with 350 children and adolescents between 3 and 18 years of age. The hospital recently received a donation of medical supplies from the Cuban Association of the United Kingdom. The Cuban government had said that the children who stopped attending school in January due to the sanitary crisis will return to their courses once the conditions have been prepared. National authorities hope to end the immunization process by the end of the year. The fully vaccinated population is of 27.6% as of Tuesday, while the desired rate for the reduction of cases is 70%. 7-year-old Agatha is one of the many subjects who benefit from the vaccination plan, who, accompanied by her older sister Amanda, of age 16, participates in the pediatric clinical trials.
Yes, I have met teenagers who have suffered from the disease. They have had some effects. They still have them. Although they are no longer sick, and that's why we also want to be in this clinical trial so that this does not happen anymore.
There is a close follow-up of these children during the recruitment process, during the follow-up of the study, after the studies. In other words, we are convinced that it is a success. It is a dream come true for our children, for teenagers, and for all the children in the world.
And we have more stories coming up after this financial break, so stay with us. Welcome back. At least 8 convoys transporting logistical equipment to U.S. troops were attacked on Tuesday in different areas of Iraq. Offensive maneuvers against the United States targets have increased in the past few months at times of rising discontent among Iraqi population due to Washington's military presence in the country. On late July, U.S. President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi sealed a pact to end the foreign combat mission in Iraq before the end of 2021, although both parties agreed that U.S. troops are to remain in Arab soil afterwards to train and assess Iraq's armed forces. Nigeria faces an agricultural crisis as many farmers in northern states flee their villages running away from violence. Farmers and other agricultural poor workers of the states of Benue, Plateau, Niger, and Nasarawa had abandoned their farmlands and their only livelihood source for the fear of being killed or kidnapped by the rampant killer herders and bandits. Some have resorted to making up for smaller farms close to the city. This has led to inflation as the high price of food items in the demand is higher than supply. While insecurity is rooted in that herder-farmer conflict, the crisis in northwest Nigeria has spiraled into broadway criminality with mass abductions for ransom, cattle theft, and banditry. The rural exodus is a key factor in driving up the cost of food in Africa's most populous country, hitting its tens of millions of poor.
There is a problem at our hands in Benue State and in Nigeria. Like I said, Benue State is the food basket of the nation. But if you have more than 1.5 million people who are displaced and cannot go to their ancestral home, where they do their farming, it becomes a big challenge.
So this insecurity now displaces everybody. We were not able to farm. Do you understand? So this place you see is where I'm managing to feed my family. I managed to harvest some maize, sold to some women who sell by the roadside. You understand? To get some other things for my family. Then I dry some that will grind and use for turning food, this food.
A peace agreement between the Taliban and the province of Panjshir in northeast Afghanistan will be reached soon, declared the spokesman of the group, Sabihullah Mujahid. The negotiations will solve the problem without a war, said Mujahid, stating that the peace agreement will be reached shortly, according to the television channel Samshad News. The spokesman said that the war is not the solution, and that's why the Taliban carry out negotiations with the local Deans and other influential people of Panjshir. He stressed that the group will not pursue the war if not obliged to do so. The last anti-Taliban armed resistance is down the valley of Panjshir, where the forces led by rebel warrior Ahmad Massoud and first Vice President Amrullah Saleh reclaimed the position of the rulers of Afghanistan. The Taliban assured on Wednesday that they will allow commercial flights in the country after the international evacuation deadline set for August 31st, which they insist on the impracticality of postponing the aid data on retrieval operations. The spokesman of the political office of Taliban, Suhail Sahin, informed on Twitter that people with legal documents will be able to travel through commercial flights beginning August 31st. This was confirmed by the Assistant Director of the Taliban's political office in Qatar, Mohammed Abbas Stanisai, after a meeting with the Ambassador of Germany to Afghanistan, Marcus Putzel. On his behalf, U.S. President Joe Biden affirmed that his country is on the path of finalizing the evacuation set for the established date in Afghanistan. The U.S. military highlighted that the Pentagon and the Department of Defense were instructed to elaborate emergency plans that will be put into action in or if all does not go according to initial design. 5 members of an all-girl African robotics team arrived in Mexico, fleeing an uncertain future at home after the recent collapse of the government and takeover by the Taliban. Mexican Deputy Foreign Minister Marta Delgado welcomed them during the news conference at Mexico City's International Airport. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said that the country had begun processing the first refugee applications of African citizens, especially women and girls, with the aid of Guillermo Puente Ordorica, ambassador of Mexico in Iran. The team, made up of girls and women as young as 14 years old, has been hailed for winning international awards for its robots and started work in March on an open-source, low-cost ventilator as the coronavirus pandemic hit the nation.
We may be very distant from what is happening in Afghanistan, but the humanitarian cause, the protection of values, and the causes that identify us Mexicans today have made us commit ourselves so that they can be in Mexico.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. And you can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Ray Gomez. I thank you for watching.